Welcome to the BLTnT podcast. I'm your host, Matt Loria, serving up real stories of business, life, technology, and transformations. You'll hear from interesting people about big changes from career shifts to life-altering decisions and the innovations that help make it all happen. It's about sharing those light bulb moments, pivot points, challenges overcome, and the journeys that inspire us to think differently. If you're on the lookout for insights to propel you forward, stories that resonate, or just a bit of inspiration on your next BLTnT move, you're in the right place. Let's dig in. Here we are with our latest episode of the BLTnT podcast. I'm very happy to have my guest, John Lucci, here with me today. Thanks for being here, John.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
It's our pleasure for sure.
Yeah.
John is the president of a company called FTE Performance, which is a management consulting company that specializes in operations consulting, mostly for the manufacturing world.
Yeah, primarily in the manufacturing world. So kind of anything inside the four walls of the assembly plant or any kind of plant manufacturing operation. We've specialized in that type of activity. And I think I mentioned to you earlier, we're contemplating rebranding ourselves to Factory Advisors because it makes a lot more sense and it's kind of straight up, what we do.
What do you do? You don't even
People
have to answer the
don't
question.
even have to answer the question. People understand it.
Well, you
better,
heard it
so.
here first on the BLTnT podcast. John Lucci,
Yeah.
future president of the
Factory Advisors.
Factory Advisors.
If we end up with that rebranding. So
Great.
Yeah.
We'll have to check with the people we know in the copyright and trademark business to make sure
There you
that's
go.
available for you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
So John and I have known each other for a bit here and getting to know each other and have a lot of common friends. And I've really enjoyed getting to know you over that time.
Oh, likewise.
Thank you. And, it's interesting. You've been bringing a kind of a flavor, to life that is new for you, right? From what you've said. It was funny. It kind of started. I was looking at your Facebook, and I saw a bunch of pictures of a fire and of a sunset,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, okay. But and I don't know you that well to judge you on it, to say is this normal or
Is
not?
this me or not?
But I brought it up to you and you said, a lot of people have been asking me
Yeah,
about
a lot of
that.
people ask me about that. So I happen to be sitting up north and have a place that, fortunate enough to have a place on a lake, and we had this beautiful sunrise. It was early. I'm drinking my coffee and I was kind of watching the sunrise, and I'm playing around with my phone and playing around with the photo options on it and stuff. And I took a few pictures and I took a few more and I started looking at them. I go, hey, these are kind of cool. So
These are Facebook worthy.
Yeah. So I posted them, and I don't post a lot of stuff on Facebook. It's pretty rare, but I posted them on Facebook, and I said, and I just had this little caption that said, "Good morning, sunshine." And then I said, "Hope you have a great day." And I thought, well, let's see who answers, right? And I'm thinking about my friends and stuff. And oddly enough, several people answered back and were kind of like, "Hey, good morning to you, my friend," and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which was really cool. But then what was really unique about it was later on, my wife started getting these phone calls from family members, and they're like, "Hey, is everything okay with John?" He posted these photos and on Facebook, and it's really not like him to post those kind. Usually it's like,
Yeah, right.
we're on a ski trip, or we're somewhere with the dog, or
Yeah.
something like that, and this was a little unusual, so people kind of got a kick out of it. But
Well, we talked about that. You're a striver, so you're always doing.
yeah,
Right.
always doing something, right?
Yeah.
Always.
So when we saw you relax, it's like whoa.
Yeah, people were like,
Especially
what's going
people who
on?
really knew you. Right?
Yeah, the people that really knew me, they're kind of like, what's going on here? So
it's been funny. We've been talking, and that's really turned into a great conversation that I've really liked. Is you kind of brought up to me, you said, well, I am 60,
yeah,
and so life is changing a little bit, and
Yeah.
let's share that. Let's share how that's kind of been evolving for you here, because it's neat that we had that moment, or that you've had that moment of something that happened that all of a sudden made it kind of obvious to others, like that you're thinking
differently, right? Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, turning 40, turning 50 didn't really affect me that much. Turning 60, for some reason, I didn't think it would affect me, but now telling people that and actually verbalizing it, it's hit me a little bit different. And it's an interesting time because you start thinking about retirement and what are you going to do with your life and what's the next chapter going to be, and are you going to keep working or you're not going to keep working? Are you going to work until you drop? Some people do
Right.
that. For me, I'm sort of going through that period of time where I'm thinking about that and thinking about what are the next steps, what's the next chapter, and what do I do with my business at this point, and my business partners, and how do I support them? And so there's a lot to that. And then we had our first grandchild about 10 months ago, and that changes your mind completely. All of a sudden you're a grandparent and you're in your 60s and so all these things are changing at once. And it does make you contemplate things differently. So
Yeah. You're still
yeah,
maintaining your cool though. Still riding a bike very often, riding a motorcycle.
I'm still doing all the things that I'm probably doing more of that now than I used to. So I ride motorcycles. I spend a lot of time in Colorado lately, the last few years, skiing, and I've gotten back into that. Um, Things that I have always enjoyed,
Mm-hmm.
but through that period when you're raising kids and you've got, as you know, soccer games to go
Yep.
to and all that kind of stuff, and hockey games, and you're carting your kids all over the place. You kind of put a lot of those things on hold. So it's been nice because I've been starting to get back into that, and then I've been getting into bicycling or cycling quite a bit more as
Mm-hmm.
well, and really spending a lot of time on a bike. And so when I'm on a bike, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm listening to books, and I'm burning through like lots of books now. I mean, I
Yeah.
probably go through, 2, 3 books a month, where before I might get through 2 or 3 a year. And
Yeah.
so all of that is kind of forming and shaping, my thinking as I take this next step. So
Yeah, that's great.
yeah,
That's great. So we started talking about, the chapters and the book, and well, really we started talking about this book that you've been reading, and how it
yeah,
kind of has given you almost kind of an optimistic view of what what the next 60
yeah.
years could look like.
Kind of the aging process, right?
Yeah.
And where you go with that. And yeah, so the book is called From Strength to Strength. The author is Arthur Brooks, and it's a really great book. I was turned on to it from a friend and colleague of mine that I worked with in our younger days, and he recently retired from his full-time career and started working with us with our consulting company, as a coach and advisor and leadership
Oh,
advisor.
okay.
And he and I were talking about this, and he recommended I read this book. So I picked it up and I read it. And what I found fascinating about it is that it really he talks about the science of kind of how your mind works. And this, early on when you're younger, you've got this fluid intelligence that really is quick, innovative. It's very, you're able to do like computational tasks and things that as you get older, it gets harder and harder to do,
Mm.
right? But what happens is then you kind of switch, and as you get, that kind of peaks in your 30s, according to science, and it peaks in your 30s and it starts to drop off pretty rapidly for everybody. It's just fact, right? And we all try to hold on to that and hold on to that, because we think we're slipping. And what's actually happening is we're building this crystallized intelligence, and that curve starts to climb, and there's not evidence, and barring any catastrophic thing with your mind that goes bad, um, there's really no evidence that shows that ever drops off or
Mm-hmm.
declines through your life. And what we would commonly refer to that as is wisdom. I mean, when I think about it and I read what he talks about in the crystallized intelligence, I think that's wisdom that we gained. And as we get older, we start to accumulate just, all this information. And he used the analogy of a librarian, right? So when you're young and you have this fluid intelligence, your librarian is like super fast recall. I run
Mm-hmm.
into you in the grocery store. I say, "Hey, Matt, how you doing?" Right? And it's very quick and
Yep.
and nimble and agile. But as we get older, I might run into the grocery store and I'm like, "Oh boy, what was his name again?"
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And my librarian has gotten slow.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that he's losing his mind, right? But the librarian is now slow. The difference is he'll come back to me with your name, but it might be when I'm in my car driving home and I'm like,
Sure.
damn, that was Matt.
Right.
And and but the difference is that librarian now has thousands and thousands of books to choose from, right? And he's gained all this knowledge and stuff. And we get really good at, as we get older, we get really good at synthesizing large amounts of information and kind of connecting the dots, right?
Mm-hmm.
And putting things together and coming up with better strategies and stuff. We can't always say to ourselves, this is exactly why I think we should go down this path or why we should do this, or, we're trying to solve problems and stuff, but we know it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because we've gained all this wisdom through the years.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like the mileage is what really adds the value.
The mileage is what adds the value. The mileage and a lot of experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we always kind of joke about it in our world. We say we want people on our consulting team that have 30 years of diverse experience, not 1 year experience 30 times.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
so it's that diverse experience that really gives people the wisdom and the ability to kind of see around corners, as we might say.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been talking about kind of how AI really almost is in what your mind is telling you is that AI kind of is filling that fluid. What's lacking in fluid now,
Yeah.
AI's grabbing that, and the wisdom piece is really helping you to leverage it and kind of put it all together
Yeah.
appropriately. So
Yeah.
you were telling me a story even about was it your mother-in-law?
It was, yeah, my mother-in-law, how we used it. She's 79 years old. And so about 2 or 3 months ago, I got well, actually about 2 years ago, I got introduced to Chat GPT when it first came out.
Mm-hmm.
And my youngest son introduced me to it. And I started using it a little bit. I started playing around with it and sort of seeing what it could do. And I basically used it like a little search engine or that type of thing. I never
Mm-hmm.
really saw the power. I mean, I saw the power in it, but I never really saw it as something, how could I leverage it? And how could I leverage it, not only personally, but in my business?
Mm-hmm.
And then a few months ago at one of our Visage events, we had a speaker come in, and he came in and started talking about how to do custom GPTs and write these assistants and build
Mm-hmm.
these custom assistants. And that just like, boom, opened up Pandora's box for me, and I started really
Yeah.
playing around with that and diving into it, and got some of my team members involved in it, and really started sort of pushing that envelope and seeing what we could do with AI assistance. And I started to think about it at the same time I was reading this book. And I started to think, wow, this AI assistance that you can develop now and write these custom GPTs or develop these chatbots or AI assistants, personal assistants, can really take the place of that fluid intelligence because it's super fast. You can ask it questions and boom, you get them back like
Mm-hmm.
almost immediately, right? If you've used it at all, you know how it is.
I
It's
use
like
it.
milliseconds.
I use it
just starts
constantly.
yeah, it just starts pouring
Well, and I
out.
just can't believe how how it's adapted and grown and started moving faster and being even more accurate.
Right.
And especially
Right.
as you train your own GPTs, but even without it, I've even noticed with you can use less prompting now than ever before
Yeah.
and get enormous answers. You
Right.
used to have to tell it, hey, you're a Bain level or McKinsey
Right.
level
Right.
consultant,
Yes.
think like this or that or whatever. You barely have to write those types of pieces into the prompt anymore, and you're getting that level of
Right.
quality in the response.
Yeah.
So it's like,
And the more you use it, the more it learns from you.
absolutely.
And the more it kind of it just gets better and better. And so I thought that, I'm thinking about that and I'm saying, well, this strength to strength thing where where our fluid intelligence is dropping off with AI now, it's like a force multiplier, right? It just all of a sudden now I have this fluid intelligence back, right? Because I
Yeah.
have this little assistant that can help me come up with things really fast. Or
Mhm.
when I'm struggling to get my words on paper, right? I
That's
have
the
this
thing that I
great
noticed the
idea.
most.
Yeah, and that's where my mother-in-law, the example I was telling you with my mother-in-law. So my mother-in-law, 79 years old, she's, on that crystallized intelligence curve, and she's running for an office in her township. And she
Mhm.
wants to win this office in her local township and be part of that and keep contributing, right? And to things she knows. And she was at my place, and my wife and I and my mother-in-law and father-in-law were sitting around, we're talking about this. And she says, yeah, I've got to write this letter for my campaign, and I've got to turn it into the township,
Mhm.
and they've got to distribute it to the community and that type of thing. And she says, I'm having trouble getting my thoughts on paper. I said, I got a tool. Let's give it a try. I
Yeah.
said, have you heard of this AI thing? And she says, no, I haven't heard of it. I hear it on the news all the time, AI this, AI that, but I don't know anything about it. I said, let me get my computer. So I popped open my computer and I started typing. I said, okay, tell me a little bit about what is important to you in your community? You know, what is it about the township you live in? What is
Hmm.
it that you like about it? What are you trying to preserve? What do you want to do? And just started telling me things, and I typed it in to ChatGPT, right? And said, now I said, help me write a letter that's going to go out to the voters that can help them understand how I feel about the community and
Hmm.
why I want this job. And it spit out this letter, and with maybe 2 tweaks, we had it down where she was like, this is the best letter ever. She goes,
Hmm.
I could have never got my thoughts out on paper this way.
Yeah,
And she turned that in and submitted it, and she ended up winning her election.
that's great.
And yeah, and so she, you know, here she is at 79 years old. She wins this election, and she's saying, this is fantastic. And she's getting notes from people and comments from people about how great her letter was and how it resonated with
Hmm.
them. And it's just that kind of thing that, um, from my perspective, that's why I call it a game changer. My brother works in my company, in our company with us as well, and he called it a mini miracle. You know,
Yeah, right.
when he first started using it, and he was like, you know, starting to use it to help with kind of mundane tasks and that whole getting your thoughts out on paper
Hmm.
and stuff. He said, "This is like a miracle."
You know, I
You
always
know?
feel like my brain as I get older, I constantly am thinking in Venn diagrams of
Yeah.
circles that are overlapping other circles, and
Yes.
then figuring
Yes.
out how to articulate that into a concept that I can bring to, someone, maybe a little younger in my
Sure.
organization who can then take action upon that.
Hmm.
And so I think what you're doing for me here is kind of, it's resonating a lot, to talk about, you know, even me, I'm a few years younger than you,
Hmm.
but I'm still on that curve. I'm still on the downside of
Yeah.
the curve.
Yeah. It's
And
inevitable
that's
for
how I'm
all of us.
leveraging it. But it's that Venn diagram. I wouldn't think I would, without the mileage that I have, I don't think I would know the topics, the
Yeah.
overlapping circles to
Yeah.
really talk about, to pull those concepts together. And then I think, I also would need the mileage and discernment to know, okay, whatever it spits out from that,
Yes.
how to manipulate it and tweak it to something usable,
Right.
to something that really
And put it
makes
in your own
sense, and
voice.
put it in my own voice. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yep.
And that's really the key, right? Is because we can't sort of rely on this AI assistant and whatever it spits out to just say, okay, I'm going to use this directly, right?
Correct.
Because if you do, it won't be authentic. It'll be, you know, people will know that it was AI generated,
Sure.
right? You can
Sure. You
tell
can
when
tell.
somebody does something
100%.
that's AI generated. But if you iterate and you use it as a tool to iterate, and you
Hmm.
use it as a tool when you develop these assistants to actually interact with it as an assistant
Hmm.
to help you do things, whatever those things happen to be, um, then it becomes much more authentic, and you get your own voice in there, right?
Yeah.
And you get your own
We
thing.
should.
And
What we should do is we'll have to include the link to Todd Brook. He's the gentleman who
yes,
put on that seminar that we
yes,
went to. It was a 2.5 day seminar that we went to that basically taught a lot about that prompting, but it also
exactly.
taught about some of the legalities of it in terms of, how many characters you have to use of your own
Right.
prompting.
And the ethics. Yeah.
Right. But how much do you have to put in of your own use? How many iterations do you have to make before it's actually really your your information?
Where it can be considered your info.
Right. You
Yes,
can't just
your
say, what are the 10 best country clubs in the nation and then publish that as your own documentation. That you have to give almost full credit essentially to the AI.
to the
You
AI at
didn't
that
put
point.
enough work of your own into it
Right.
to say, hey, we're making that an article. But that is, of course, the danger, right? Is that there's so much AI generated content out there, that how much of it's junk. And so that's
Right.
that's where I think like these valuable conversations of face to face and real experience of somebody who's been there, done that,
Yep.
they have so much value,
Yep.
right? Versus we can't just rely on whatever we're reading
Right.
on the internet.
So we're actually working with Todd in his company. So his
Oh, you've
company is
employed them?
called, we've commissioned him to do some work for us,
Great.
and it's been great. I mean, his company's called AI Unchained,
Hmm.
and he's helping us. So what we did initially is we kind of converted our custom GPTs that were out there on ChatGPT or OpenAI in that environment, and we moved them into Todd's environment, which makes them more secure,
Okay.
and allows us to use more. You know, I was concerned about my company data and things of that nature that we're putting in there to use for internal work. Um, and then eventually for external work, right, with our clients and stuff.
Mm.
And part of what you're describing, we're actually going through, and we've now written an AI policy for our team members, and we're developing a data disclosure statement so that when we work with our clients and we use AI as part of that, we want to disclose that,
Mm.
which is a tricky thing because it's sort of like saying to your client, you wouldn't have a data disclosure thing that says we're going to use the internet, right?
Right.
But if you go back 25 years and you were using the internet, people would have been very concerned about that,
Sure.
right? And so now they're concerned about AI, and yet it's the same, conceptually, it's the same thing,
Pulling
right?
from a lot of the same
It's pulling
data,
from the same
that's for
data,
sure.
and yeah, and it's doing a lot of the same things, and it exposes you from a risk perspective, very similar to what, the way you're exposed on the internet if you're
Sure.
just searching the internet.
Sure.
So
It's kind of the internet on steroids, right?
it's the internet on steroids, without a doubt.
This episode of the BLTnT podcast is sponsored by Auxium, business IT and cybersecurity designed to outsmart chaos. Empowered by Juniper Networks. Automate your network with Juniper Networks and the Mist AI platform, the world's first AI-driven wired and wireless network. Let's kind of go back to the strength-to-strength
Sure.
piece a little bit as well here again. The fact that you're kind of being purposeful and thoughtful of, hey, what's the next 60 years look like?
Yeah.
For John and your company and your family and everything like that. And so, what are the things that are challenging you? What are the things that you're thinking about in terms of? I know we talked in kind of in preparation here of like your own relevance, right? And so it
Yeah.
sounds like, I mean, I don't know what the stats are, but I certainly know not every 79-year-old is using AI. But
Right.
I also
Right.
don't know, how many 60-year-olds are really using it
Right.
as heavily
As I might be using
as
it.
you might be using it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, I talk to a lot of my friends and stuff and people in my peer group, and there are some exceptions that are doing what I'm doing, and they've sort of gravitated to
Mhm.
it. Others are sort of thinking of it as more of a novelty at this point in
Mm.
time. Um, and of course, I got all excited about it, and I'm kind of a tech geek, anyways. I actually started my career in robotics and stuff back when Industry 4.0 wasn't a thing,
Yeah.
but robotics and controls and all that. So automation to me I've always been fascinated with that, and I started my career that way. And I kind of look at the whole AI thing as just automation. It's a way of automating tasks that we could never automate in the past,
Mhm.
right? So it's very helpful from that perspective. But I'm not sure that I think that's a really great question. Is I'm not sure how many people in sort of my age group are using it and really leveraging it the way they could. I know within our company, we are introducing it pretty broadly to folks and saying,
Mhm.
look, here's some of the things that you could do. And the biggest one is the one we've hit on already, was just like, how do I get my thoughts out of my head and on paper? And we've got, in our company, we really employ, and our advisors, our factory advisors, are the ones that are they have 30 years of experience in most cases, 30 or more years of
Mm.
experience, and they're kind of on their second curve. And what they want to do, they were in very prominent careers. Many of them were plant managers of large automotive plants. They were executive VPs of operations. They had all this great, wonderful experience, and now they want to give back, and they want to do it in a way that keeps them relevant and
Mhm.
keeps them kind of in the game. But at the same time, they don't really have a desire to go sit in 8 hours of meetings a day,
Yeah, sure.
right? In their previous career
Yeah.
jobs and stuff. And they've done that. They've been there. They've reached great, done great things, had great accomplishments, and now they, in a sense, they want to give back a little bit and have some service. And so
Mhm.
they, as I think about my own career and, going from a corporate world to consulting, to now my own consulting firm with some partners, and I think about how that's evolved, and now where do I go from here? Because I've got these really capable partners that are taking over, and they're
Right.
they're now running the company, and they're doing that, and I'm sort of in this no man's land where I'm sort of feeling, at times, what's my relevance in all of this, right? And how can I
Well,
help? And so you kind of go from being a player on the field
yeah.
to now being a coach on the sidelines,
Right.
right? And you've
Right.
got to like figure out how to get that value from being that coach and not being on the field as much.
Yeah, I almost interrupted you. But
That's
what I
okay.
was
Yeah.
going to say was, to me, the keeping up on modern tools helps you maintain your relevance, right? I always
I
think
think
of
so.
how do you make sure that how do you make sure that you're relevant enough, right? I mean, I would think it's a little weird if you were, all over Snapchat,
Yeah.
right? I would think, okay,
Right.
you're trying a little too hard,
Right.
but the fact that you're all over Chat GPT makes me go, okay, John is maintaining his relevance. So if I'm a younger person working with you,
Yeah.
I want to listen because I'm getting the crystallized piece, but I'm also getting you're taking a modern approach to it, right? And so I think
Yeah.
we were chatting
I hope
about,
that's how they feel.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. But
Yeah.
I noticed your ear here isn't that long
No, no.
either. So like what we talked
Yeah.
about is like what you have to do in terms of maintaining your relevance is you have to show that you know you want to be the wisest elder, not the long in the tooth,
Yeah.
and more ear here
Yeah. Right.
than head
That
here.
I'm distracting them
Yeah,
from that.
exactly,
Right.
right. And so
Yeah.
I think that what you're doing is enormously beneficial, and you stay fit, you stay active, and you're doing this. I mean, that I think it doesn't sound like you're missing on too much of the what needs to be done to maintain relevance.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope so. I mean, some of the things, um, it's that, part of his book, you hit on a little bit earlier, the striver thing, right? He, in the book, Strength to Strength, he talks about the striver's curse,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that many of us, we've just been strivers our whole life. We're always working toward that next goal, that next goal, that next
Yeah.
goal. And I've been that way my whole life. I've carried around like a little 3x5 card in my wallet forever, right? That's like, here's my goals for the next 5 years. Here's my goal for the next 10 years, right?
Yep.
And they're big, lofty ones. And and some of them I was able to achieve, some of them I wasn't. And that's okay. But it's really you get in this groove of like striving all the time, striving all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And he calls it the striver's curse because it's really hard to then get off of that goal, and maybe your next goals need to be more in service of others and in service of something else,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so thinking about that and thinking about how I can do that and maintain some relevance that way, I think is kind of where I am in a headspace
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Well, we talked about that with that same person that you had mentioned about Paul. I think was it you that mentioned Paul in the talk they did about the exit planning. Might have been earlier that we were talking about this.
Yeah.
At the last seminar that we were at.
Yeah, with the private equity
Yeah,
stuff.
it was
Yes.
a private equity discussion,
Mhm.
and what was interesting was what is everybody doing now that they're
Oh,
out,
right.
right?
Yeah.
And there's a fella that we know, a common friend named Rich Booms,
Yep.
who you didn't know Rich during his exit planning stages, but
No, I didn't.
But I did, and he's probably was the most intentional guy that I've ever seen go through kind of what did he want life to be like, because he had the striver's curse,
Right.
and he knew that if he didn't fill the time up with the next level of appropriate things to do,
Mhm.
that he was gonna lose his mind,
Right.
right? And so I've never seen anybody go at it so intentionally like he did.
Yeah.
And you brought up to me when we were chatting was now what Rich is doing is he's helping bring his crystallized knowledge to
young people.
to young people.
And he's really helping a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in service of younger people now. And I
Yep.
thought it was amazing what he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked about how his relevance is maintained, though, is almost like you have to always earn trust, right?
Yeah.
Trust is something that's earned. And so Rich has this uncanny ability to give intense focus, patience, and listening to whomever he's
Mhm.
in front of.
Mhm.
He definitely is one of those people you walk in front of him and there's no one else in the room as far
Right.
as you would know,
Right.
when you're speaking with him. For you, what do you think that your superpower, or just even if it's not a superpower now, one that you want to hone in on as you're really grabbing onto this crystallized intelligence, obviously backed with AI.
Yeah.
You are John Lucci powered by
AI. Right. Yeah. That's a great question. I think I've been told that I'm pretty good at coming up with like creative solutions to problems and stuff.
Mhm.
And that's great. You can be a good problem solver, right? And that's really important through life. And I tell my kids this, I tell people that I work with this, be a good problem solver, right? Come with, you can be a great pointer out of problems, but if you don't come with some solutions and some
Yeah.
ideas, even if your ideas are no good, at least the fact that you're coming with some ideas is really important, right?
Hmm.
And then people can build on those ideas. So I've always felt like I've been pretty good at problem solving and kind of looking at things and saying, okay, get creative around them, and how can we get beyond this or solve this problem or do that type of thing. Maybe that'll be the next thing, is like, how can I help coach people on, and my team at FTE and um, others on, how do you do that? How do you solve problems, and how do you, I don't know, maybe bring that wisdom to the problem solving
Sure.
world and stuff. But I feel like we're doing some good things too, in that we're giving people that want like a second career and that want a second act, if you will, not really a career where they want to climb a ladder, but a career where they want to, provide some service
Yeah,
back.
truly contributing.
Yeah, truly contributing, and we're doing it in an area, in manufacturing, that has a dire need for it.
Hmm.
I know we talked about this a little before, but the manufacturing environment, um, for the last 25, 30 years, just nobody tells their kids, hey, you should go into manufacturing,
Yeah.
right? You're not like college recruiters or high school guidance counselors aren't saying, hey, Matt, you should go into manufacturing, right? That's just not cool. Nobody
Hmm.
says that. They
Hmm.
say, oh, you should be a knowledge worker and you should go into computers. Well, you should go into IT,
Yeah.
which is what you did,
I
right?
know that
And
everybody wants to be a YouTuber. Is
everybody
that
now wants to be a
that's what all my
YouTuber. I
kids want
guess
to be.
that's, yeah, I guess that's the new thing.
Yeah.
So there's this big gap, right? There's this knowledge gap. And if you pay any attention to what's going on in the world today, even if you wanted to go down the political route and you look at, nearshoring and how do we bring
Hmm.
manufacturing back into this
Hmm.
country, um, it's a big deal and it's a big problem that we have. And that skills gap is a big problem as well. So I feel like if I can give back to that in some way, I've been thinking about that a lot lately as well, and thinking about how could I contribute in a way that maybe I can bring some cool factor back to manufacturing or
Mm.
back to skilled trades or that type of thing, because there is a dire need for it. And I had the good fortune of, in my previous life, where I was with one of the bigger consulting firms, and I traveled all over the world, just about every continent. And I always traveled because we were doing manufacturing, helping manufacturing companies and stuff, get better from a productivity, quality,
Mhm.
that type of thing, cost perspective. And it was always in these developing nations. And I would go there and I'd be like, this is crazy. I'm sitting here in the Czech Republic, and all they want to do is build a manufacturing base,
Mhm.
because they know that they're going to build this manufacturing base. That's going to help build the middle class. That's going to help build good jobs, and it's
Mhm.
going to have good paying jobs, and it's going to bring everybody up. And at the same time, back home, I'm saying all we're doing is trying to get rid of our manufacturing.
Absolutely.
We're trying to push it out of here, and we're trying to say, oh, those are jobs nobody you
Yeah,
shouldn't,
we can get them done cheaper
we can
elsewhere
get
in
them done
these other
cheaper elsewhere.
areas.
Yeah. And so um, I think we're starting to realize that that wasn't a good plan. And so,
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for the good that came out of the globalization in manufacturing of, we learned Kaizen, we learned,
right.
different,
Yeah. Techniques
lean
and lean
manufacturing,
manufacturing.
whatever,
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
we learned a lot from that. But
Yep.
what we also then learned, especially during COVID, was we learned that, uh-oh, if that factory is too far away,
Yeah. Supply
we've given
chain.
up supply chain we've
Yep.
increased supply chain concerns, we've increased security concerns now.
Right.
That's obviously the thing that's front and center for all of us right now, is that, okay, well, we've got all of these materials that even if the material starts here, it goes overseas,
Yeah.
and we don't even have control over it. If we need that for defense or for other,
That's right.
critical items. I was just at an event the other night where I learned that we've imported
Imported more
more
than we've
food than we've
exported.
exported.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We used to be a net exporter.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. And so that means our reliance on food sources outside of our country
Yeah.
is higher than ever.
Right.
So,
Right.
did you think that you were starting to pick up? I mean, I guess hindsight 2020. Did you feel like you were picking up on those trends while you were still in the heat of helping these other developing nations
Oh, for
and really
sure.
get that you were going,
Yeah,
is this right?
for sure I
Were you
was.
asking that question?
Yeah, 100%. Was always asking that question. Was happy to help. Was, I was glad that I was able to help and we had teams that could help. But it didn't take very long to start to realize that. And you start to say to yourself, there is a reason why every developing nation wants to start with manufacturing,
Hmm.
right? They want to build things, they want to make things, they want to be a producer of something.
And then be
Um,
self-sustaining
and
in
then they
some
eventually
some
want to be
way.
self-sustaining.
Yeah,
Exactly. And so um, that's something that you can't help but notice when you start traveling and you start going to these other countries and you see what they're doing and how
hmm,
they want to compete. Um, and I'm telling you, it's not just the poor nations or it's not just the developing ones either. I spent time in Saudi Arabia and with the Saudis, and they wanted to build a manufacturing industrial base, and they're doing that now.
hmm.
They're building this big industrial base. I mean, they're one of the richest countries on the planet, right? They sit on all this oil,
Right.
and yet they wanted to build a manufacturing base, and the main reason they wanted to do that was because they wanted to provide good-paying jobs for their citizens,
Hmm.
right? And now they wanted to do it in a more high-tech way, and they wanted to do it with things um, that where they could be competitive because they had all this cheap energy. And so they could do things like smelting aluminum,
Hmm.
right? As an example,
Yep.
and which is really energy intensive. But they could do it there because they had all this energy, right?
Sure.
So it was interesting, but everybody wants to build an industrial base, and we weren't doing that. And now we are. Now we're finally starting to wake up to that,
Yep.
and we're sort of reshoring. Mexico right now is just booming more than it ever has because that's the other part. Then people are coming back. They're nearshoring, right?
Hmm.
Not necessarily building
Sure.
in the U.S., but they're building
As close as they
in North
can.
America
Yeah.
as close as they can. Yeah. And when you get into, I mean, there's a whole bunch that goes into that, right, around labor costs and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, those are some of the things that I think about, and I think about how that relates to, I was saying earlier, this gap in skills and skilled labor. You and I are both kind of DIYers when it comes
Oh
to
yeah.
home projects and stuff, and some of that is driven through from, it's just kind of fun to work on some home projects at
Hmm.
times. A lot of that's driven by it's just so hard to get somebody to come over and do
True.
electrical work on your
Yeah.
condo or
Yeah. Right.
something, or on your house, or
Yeah.
you want to do some remodeling, and it's just hard to find
Yeah.
skilled labor
We
to do
used a
that.
word just a few minutes ago of of self-sustaining,
Yeah.
and it's kind of interesting. I and you also brought up the fact of it fell out of vogue, right? To be in manufacturing,
Yeah.
whatever. But it
Or the
also
trades
or
or
the
yeah.
trades, yeah,
Hmm.
and it's like it also fell out of vogue to be in farming, and
Sure.
now you see people. Now you see people who have means who are saying, you know what, I want to be a
Oh,
homesteader.
they're doing hobby farms and
Yeah,
stuff. I have a
absolutely.
buddy that's
Because
doing
it's
that.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's a hobby, but it's a hobby asterisk, which says if the shit hits the fan,
I'm
I know
self-sustaining.
I've got self sustainability here
Yeah.
where my chickens are producing
Yeah.
eggs, and
Exactly.
I've got something to live off of if the
Yeah.
power grid goes down
Right.
for a month while while we're in some sort
Yeah.
of turmoil.
Fortunately, I have friends that do that, so I know where I'm going to get
Well,
my
we'll see how
eggs and
close of
bacon
friends
and
they
stuff.
are. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see how close of
Right.
friends they are when
Yeah. If something were to go, if something
yeah.
were to go bad. Yeah.
That's how we'll start to judge our friendships.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is interesting because that skills gap, I mean, whether it's in agriculture, farming, or whether it's in
Mhm.
in the trades and stuff, I mean, it's a big problem. And that guy Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy,
Sure.
he's a big advocate for that, right? And I've started reading some of the
Yeah.
things he's got a foundation, I think. I can't remember. It's like Mike Works or
That
something
helps
like
people
that. And
get into the trades, right?
yeah, and he kind of highlighted that, started seeing that happening as well, and said, we got to make it appealing again. And I was doing a little bit of research around that recently, and I was looking at like, what do welders make and what do
Yeah.
electricians and electricians, plumbers, um, HVAC people, welders. I mean, these people are making 90,000 $90,000 a year.
Sometimes
And
even
I think,
more.
I was going to say, I think that's like an average, a baseline,
Yeah.
because I know in some of the areas here in Michigan, for sure, it's a lot more
Yeah.
expensive than that.
Well into six
Yeah,
figures.
well into six figures. And so, maybe that becomes the catalyst where all of a sudden people are saying to their young kids, they're saying, hey, look, you can go work in a cubicle somewhere,
Right.
or you could go be an electrician and be out working with your hands, working on the job, doing that type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, in some of those jobs, I mean, most of the ones that you just mentioned, they're not going to be automated away. Well,
No,
and
very difficult to
even if
be.
they are
Yeah.
eventually
Yeah.
automated away, right? I mean, I know we've seen 3D printed houses that
Sure.
the electrical's already included in it or
Right.
whatever, but
Right.
that's
That's a ways off.
that's a
Yeah.
ways off, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could actually say to this current upcoming working generation, like, you can be pretty assured that you'll have a career as an electrician from,
Oh yeah.
if you're 20 years old today, till
Through
you're
retirement.
60 or 70,
Yeah.
you could probably almost guarantee that
Exactly.
electrician jobs will be there.
Yeah.
Not the same for if you're talking about some of the jobs in manufacturing, right? Especially that are not skilled,
Right.
or things like truck driving, right?
Yeah.
That would be one that I would be concerned for someone, if you're
with
just getting
autonomous
into,
vehicles and
yeah,
stuff, right? At some
exactly.
point they'll be,
Yep.
yeah. Well, even coding, right? So software and coding. I mean, coding's another one that with AI,
Right.
you
It could
know,
be
I mean,
automated away, but
it's a big deal for those folks right now. And
yeah,
you
you need
sort
to
of
be an
look at,
AI coder.
yeah, you need to be an AI coder. You need to know how to do that,
Yeah.
right? But it's interesting because, I think about those careers as well, and, tying that back to the AI. And like you said, it's pretty hard to, if it's a hands-on career where you actually physically have to be there and do something,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty hard to automate that away. But, if you're going into accounting, if you're going into legal, if you're going into coding, software coding, those are all places I'd be really concerned about.
You
And
bet.
if I was a, I mean, I hate to say it, but if I was a kid in college right now and I was halfway through an accounting degree, I'd be a little concerned,
Sure.
given what's going on with AI.
Sure.
So, and I know all the big firms are investing millions in developing their own AI and stuff, right? And where are they going to take all that? I'm not sure, but even like the legal field, I mean, I wrote a custom GPT to be my legal assistant, right?
Uh-huh.
And I've run some contracts through there that that people have sent to me.
Yep.
And well, I mentioned to you that I'm developing my AI policy and my data processing. So
Mhm.
Todd Brook from AI Unchained, he gave me a copy of his data processing, and
Okay.
I stuck it right back into the AI, and I said, hey, here's what my company does. Help me rewrite this thing, and it rewrote it.
Wow.
Now I've since sent that to our legal folks, and I've said, can you guys give this a once over? And it's been a week now, and they haven't gotten to it yet.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, boy, I could put this into my GPT,
Yeah.
and it's done in 30 milliseconds.
And we know that someone out there
And-
is training the AI some way along the way about all of
Absolutely.
the law,
Absolutely.
so that it'll be able to interpret it.
Right. Right. Think
you know,
about tax
pretty
codes
clearly.
and tax laws
Sure.
and all those things, right? It's the kind of,
Yeah.
it's an interesting time. That's
It's
for
wild.
sure.
It's
Yeah.
wild. So, one thing we didn't really talk about yet is family life. So,
Yeah.
we know that you live in Southeast Michigan. You have a
Mhm.
vacation home in Northern Michigan.
Yeah.
Talk about your family. Talk about how many kids. I know you have one grandchild.
One
now.
grandchild. Yep. So 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl.
Who's your favorite?
Who's my
I'm just
favorite?
kidding. Don't answer that.
Yeah, no, they're all my favorite. They all have, really unique qualities and stuff, and we enjoy spending time with all of them. So, my oldest son, we'll start with him. He lives in the Chicago area, and he and his wife just had their first baby, and
Okay.
so now my grandson is 10 months old, and he's developing that personality and stuff. And
That's great.
we wish they lived closer, but Chicago's not that far away, right? It's
Right.
5 hours we can be there or they're here. Having the place in northern Michigan really is a good draw because it's a place that, and when we bought the place, that's what we thought about. We thought, we need a place that our kids are going to want to come to.
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily going to want to spend time at our home here and spend their vacations here, but they
Sure.
do like to spend their vacations up there. So we get a lot of time during the summer. We get to see them a lot, and that's really great.
That's great.
And then my daughter and her husband, they live in Denver, and so that's a long ways away, but they come home quite a bit as
Mhm.
well, and for long weekends, and they vacation up north at our place as well.
Mhm.
And then we spend time out there in the winter, and I mentioned I like to ski and stuff, so
Yeah.
it's nice. We get to go out there, we get to see them quite a bit. I ski with them, half
Where do you
dozen
guys normally
times.
ski? What's the favorite
Um,
or favorites?
they use what's called the Icon Pass, so
Yep.
the kids like they like Copper Mountain, Arapahoe Basin. Those are kind of their favorite
Mhm.
up in the area, so we stay up in Summit County. Um, I like Vale and Beaver Creek are
Mhm.
probably been my two favorites.
Mhm.
And then I like Keystone and I like Copper and I like A Basin. So A Basin, I'm not super familiar with because every time I've been there in the last 2 years, it's been like a whiteout snowstorm.
You
So I
can't even see your way
really,
around.
yeah, I really don't know where the hell I'm skiing, and it makes me a little nervous.
Yeah.
So I stick to the runs I know and I don't really adventure around. And my daughter keeps telling me, you got to come on a bluebird day.
Right.
You'll love it there, but it's always a whiteout when I go there.
Nice.
So it speaks to the snow conditions. The snow
Sure.
conditions are always great, but it's always coming down hard. And then my youngest son lives a mile from us and bought a house and just recently got engaged. And
Congratulations to him.
yeah, and so that's exciting as well. So we'll have another wedding coming up, and then they'll all be married off and stuff.
Fantastic.
And that's great. My wife and I have been married now for 37 years. So that's been great. She has a lot of patience. I don't. It's good that she has a lot of patience. She puts up with me. Um, and our kids, I mean, I feel like I was talking about this with a buddy of mine that, old college roommate that I had dinner with. My wife and I had dinner with him and his wife last night. We've known
Mhm.
him for almost 40 years now. And since we were all dating, and we talked about our kids and stuff. And, how do you know
Let's
if you,
clarify that you were all dating
no,
individual other people.
yeah,
Okay.
no,
Okay. Thanks.
yeah, Sherry and I were dating and Len and Maurice were dating.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
So just to clarify,
Good
yeah.
job.
So we were talking about kids and how do you know if you did well with your kids and what advice do you give them about their kids now and all of that. And we kind of look at it and I said, I look at it and they're all out there, they're doing their thing, they're contributing to society, they're active and they're doing good things. And I said, so I think I won. I think at that point we did a great job. I
That's
contribute
great.
a lot of that to my wife. I think she gives them a lot of their empathy and their softer side. Although, as I mentioned earlier, I'm getting softer.
Turning sentimental.
Yep, turning more sentimental. And I probably give them more of the business acumen and more of that drive and that energy. I probably have bestowed them with the striver's curse. So,
But now you have tools to help them
but now I
through,
have tools eventually when
when
it's
they
their
reach
turn.
the level of the curve,
Yeah,
right? The top of the
exactly.
curve.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Great.
yeah, so
Great.
that's been great.
What else would you want to talk about? What else would you want people to know about you, or what questions would you have for me? What would you like to go with this?
I think at the end of the day, it's thinking about that next chapter. It's thinking about for me, like we said, I'm a bit older. I'm a little further ahead on
13
the
years.
the
You got
curve.
13
Is that
years
what it
on you.
is?
Yep.
13
Yep.
years on you. Yeah. Um, so it's transitioning time, right? It's a time to transition. I can't see myself as a retiree that goes off and plays golf all the time or rides my motorcycle all the time, or because I like too many different things
Mm-hmm.
and I'm always kind of jumping around doing different things, and I like that, but a pure life of leisure doesn't really appeal to me. It
Yeah.
just
Contributing is a word that you've brought up a number of times, and I think
yeah,
that seems to be really meaningful to you to make sure that you are contributing.
yeah, in some way,
Mm-hmm.
shape or form, right? And
Yeah.
and that's sort of evolving right now, and that type of thinking is evolving. And um so we'll see where it goes. I don't
Great.
have a clear picture. I don't have a clear plan of what the next 5, 10, 15 years are going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
But it's evolving and it's kind of coalescing around these ideas of this, like I said, my buddy Brian turned me on to this book, Strength to Strength, and
Yeah.
this crystallized intelligence, and how do you use that and, impart that wisdom on people and help them sort of see around corners and not make the same mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I think it's I think that it's great that you've started it this early on, thinking like this and
Yeah.
putting a focus to it, right? So that you don't get to 70 years old and you say, I think I need to retire now, and then there's nothing there
Nothing
for you,
left, right?
right? And
Or nothing. Yeah.
there's no preparation for what's next. And so I commend you for how you're doing it. You're an inspiration to me
Oh, thank you.
on how you're doing it. So
Thank
it
you.
makes me want to think about it. So I'll try to get it started even earlier
Yeah.
based on what I learned from
Yeah.
you. But thanks for doing this. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
You're an interesting guy. I think you're a great person, and I'm glad you've been a part of this.
Oh, well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate it as well. And thanks for having me. And, we'll see where the next chapters take us both. So,
Great.
all
Great.
right.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you.